The massive glass dome of the Galactic Council stretched high above like a frozen rainbow. Its walls glowed with strange lights that pulsed faster when the debate grew heated. Ambassador Lee Min-ho stood at the center podium, wearing his simple, blue and white Earth uniform. Around him, rising up like a giant stadium, sat creatures from 847 different worlds. The bug-like Velthari were clicking their hard shells in anger. Their translator's voice echoed through the chamber. Humanity broke our direct orders during the Corvin crisis. This cannot be accepted. Min-ho's jaw tightened. The Corvin crisis, where humans had saved 3 million people from a dying planet, that the Council had decided was too expensive to help. The choice had been simple: follow orders and let innocent beings die, or do what was right. Park Junwoo, the human engineer who had built half the machines keeping this very station running, whispered to his aide, "They're really going to kick us out, aren't they?" The crystal-like hegemony representative stood up next. Their diamond body split the chamber's light into rainbow colors. Humans always question our rules. They are too unpredictable. This threatens our peaceful galaxy. One by one, species that humanity had helped stood up to speak against them. The water-breathing Federation, whose home planet humans had cleaned after a terrible disaster. The Silicon Collective, whose first contact rules humans had written. The Nomad Fleet, whose people human doctors had saved from a deadly plague. Each one had a story of how humans had helped them. Each one now voted to throw humans out of the Council. Ambassador Lee Min-ho listened to it all with the patience his people had learned over 300 years of galactic diplomacy. When the accusations finally ended, he was allowed to speak. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the huge chamber. "Humanity has served this Council faithfully for 3 centuries. We have been your mediators, your engineers, your peacekeepers. We have built your communication networks, kept your trade routes safe, and stood between your wars." The chamber fell completely silent. Even the humming of the air systems seemed to stop. "But we have never been treated as your equals," Min-ho continued. "Today proves that. You call our compassion dangerous. You say our willingness to save lives is wrong. Very well." He stood straighter, and every human in the chamber felt the weight of this moment. "Before you vote to throw us out, know this. We choose to leave ourselves. Starting right now, all human workers will begin leaving Council operations. We thank you for 3 centuries of cooperation." The vote came quickly. 846 species voted to expel humanity. Only the ancient keepers, mysterious beings who rarely spoke, chose not to vote at all. As Min-ho gathered his papers, one of the keepers approached him. These beings were so old that no one remembered their real species name. "You understand what this means?" The keeper whispered, their voice like wind through space. Min-ho nodded grimly. "Better than they do." The council chamber erupted in relief and celebration. Finally, they were free of the troublesome humans who always made their carefully ordered universe complicated. The crystal beings glowed brighter with happiness. The bug-like creatures clicked their approval. The water breathers sent pleased bubbles through their breathing apparatus. But in the human section, there was only quiet dignity. Ambassador Lee Min-ho looked around the chamber one last time, memorizing the faces of beings his people had died to protect. He thought of the human engineers who had designed the very life support systems keeping this station alive. He thought of the human doctors who had developed cures for diseases that plagued dozens of species. He thought of the human teachers who had helped young beings from hundreds of worlds learn to read and write. All of that would end now. As the human delegation filed out of the chamber, Park Junwoo's aide asked quietly, "Sir, what happens to all the systems we built? The communication networks, the medical equipment, the navigation systems?" Park looked back at the celebrating council members. "They'll figure it out," he said, "or they won't." The keeper who had spoken to Min-ho watched the humans leave with ancient, sad eyes. In their long lifetime, they had seen many civilizations rise and fall. They had watched species grow proud and foolish, then collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. The humans were different, though. In 3 centuries of service, they had never sought to dominate or control. They had simply helped where help was needed, fixed what was broken, and stood between the strong and the weak. Now they were leaving, and the Keeper suspected that the galaxy was about to learn a very hard lesson about the difference between order and stability, between control and cooperation. As the chamber doors closed behind the last human, the celebration continued. But in the depths of space, human ships were already receiving new orders. The word spread quickly through humanity's networks. Pack everything, shut down the systems, and come home. The galaxy had made its choice. Soon, it would live with the consequences. The Great Withdrawal was about to begin, and with it, the slow unraveling of everything humanity had built to hold the galaxy together. 6 months after the vote, the galaxy began to shake. What had seemed like a simple job change was turning into something much bigger. Humanity had become like the blood in the galaxy's body, and now that blood was stopping. Chief Engineer Park Jun-woo stood in the control room of Station Harmony, humanity's biggest space base. Around him, his team worked quietly to hand over control of their area's machines to council workers. "Sir," called Lieutenant Choi Min-jung from her computer. "The Velthari are asking for more time again. They say their engineers need longer to understand the quantum machines." Park almost smiled. The Velthari had been the loudest voices wanting humans gone. Now they were begging for just a few more days of human help. "No," he said simply. "We leave on time." All across the galaxy, the same thing happened thousands of times. Dr. Song Hee-jun, head doctor of the hospital ship Mercy, watched as her mixed crew got ready for the ship's trip back to human space. For 50 years, the Mercy had been the main medical ship for 3 whole sectors of space. "Doctor," her Velthari head nurse came up to her carefully. "My government offered me a big promotion if I stay and take command of Mercy." Dr. Song looked at her friend. They had worked together for over 10 years, had saved countless lives side by side. "And I don't know how to use half the machines on this ship. The bio-neural interfaces, the quantum surgery arrays, they're all designed by humans." "I know," Song said gently. "I'm sorry, Kethvi. I really am." On the factory world of Kepler 442b, Master Technician Oh Sung-min watched his team shut down the air processors that had changed the planet from a barely livable rock into a garden world. The local crystal officials watched nervously as his team sealed the quantum cores and uploaded the control programs to safe servers. "You're really not going to give us the access codes?" the crystal administrator asked, their diamond body dim with worry. "The codes die with the quantum keys," Oh replied. "Council security rules. Your rules. No one species can control strategic systems alone." What none of them wanted to admit was that the systems were so complex, so carefully built, around human thinking, that the codes would be useless anyway. It would take teams of the galaxy's best engineers years just to understand how humans had made the impossible work so easily. Captain Han Dong-wook, commander of the merchant ship New Seoul, got his final navigation update from the Nexus Communication Network. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy that let them talk instantly across huge distances. His ship was one of thousands of human vessels scattered across known space, all now getting the same simple message: "Come home." The withdrawal was careful, efficient, and complete. Humanity had learned over 3 centuries to never leave their technology with others without proper protection. What the Council had seen as paranoia, humanity had simply called being careful. But the problem started immediately. Ships began getting lost in hyperspace without human pilots to read the quantum signals. The communication network started failing as relay stations broke down without human technicians to fix them. On mining stations, the great machines that dug precious metals from asteroids ground to a halt. Human engineers had designed them, but, more importantly, they had learned over decades how to feel when something was wrong, making tiny adjustments that no manual could teach. The Velthari tried to keep the trade routes open, but without human navigators who knew how to read them, dangerous quantum storms, cargo ships started disappearing. What had been safe, profitable journeys became deadly gambles. The crystal hegemony's best minds worked day and night to understand the atmospheric processors on their worlds. But the machines seemed to have a life of their own, responding to human intuition in ways that pure logic could not capture. "It's like they built the machines to think like humans," complained one crystal engineer to another. "We can copy what they did, but we can't understand why it works." Meanwhile, the hospital ship Mercy sat empty in space dock. Dr. Kethvy had tried to operate it, but the bio-neural systems that controlled everything from life support to surgery could only work properly with human brain patterns. Without human doctors, the galaxy's most advanced medical ship was just expensive junk. Communication delays between worlds went from seconds to minutes to hours. The Nexus network, which had connected the galaxy like a nervous system, was dying, without human technicians to tune its delicate quantum-entangled systems. In the council chambers, emergency meetings happened every day. But now, with communication problems, some representatives couldn't even attend. The crystal beings flickered with stress. The bug-like Velthari clicked nervously. "Surely this is temporary," insisted the Velthari representative. "We just need time to learn their systems." But the ancient keeper, who had watched civilizations rise and fall for thousands of years, shook their heads slowly. "You still don't understand," they whispered. "Humans didn't just build machines, they built relationships. They made technology that worked because they cared about making it work. We sought to replace them with logic and rules, but caring cannot be programmed." The Great Withdrawal continued, and with each human ship that left, another piece of galactic civilization crumbled. The galaxy was about to learn that some things, once broken, are very hard to fix. 1 year after humanity left, the Velthari representative stood at the same podium where Lee Min-ho had said goodbye. He spoke with confidence to the remaining council members. "Fellow members, I am happy to report that everything is going well. We have fixed the small technical problems, and our combined knowledge has proven we can easily fill the gaps left by human withdrawal." But he did not mention the 17 cargo ships lost in hyperspace last month. Their navigation systems had failed without human pilots who knew how to read the quantum signals. He also did not mention the growing communication blackouts as Nexus relay stations began breaking down across the outer rim. On Kepler 442b, the crystal hegemony's best engineers stared in confusion at the atmospheric processor control panels. For 6 months, they had tried to keep the systems running using old human instruction manuals. The quantum cores were still working, but efficiency had dropped by 30% and they could not figure out why. "The harmonic patterns don't match what the books say," reported their chief engineer, a being whose crystal structure could process calculations at near quantum speeds. "It's like the humans were fixing problems that aren't written down anywhere." What they did not understand was that master technician Oh Seung-min and his team had spent decades learning to feel the processor's rhythms. They made thousands of tiny adjustments based on experience that no book could capture. In the medical sector, the crisis was more immediate. Dr. Kethvy, now chief medical officer of the Mercy under Velthari command, faced her first major emergency. A plague had broken out on 3 worlds in the Vega sector. The hospital ship's bio-neural diagnostic systems, designed to work with human brainwave patterns, could not sync properly with her neural structure. "We are flying blind," she reported to the Council's medical committee. "I can operate maybe 40% of the ship's medical systems. The quantum surgical arrays need neural interfaces that only human doctors seem able to manage." The committee approved hiring human medical consultants at very high prices, but most human doctors had already gone back to Earth space or refused to work under non-human command. Meanwhile, in the deeper regions of Council space, old hatreds began to surface again. The Silicon Collective and the Organic Alliance had kept an uneasy peace for over a century. Their natural hatred for each other had been balanced by human diplomatic mediation. Ambassador Lee Min-ho had personally negotiated their last peace treaty just 2 years before humanity left. Without human peacekeepers to watch the border zones, incidents began to get worse. A silicon mining operation accidentally poisoned an organic farming world. The organics responded by releasing a bioweapon that ate through silicon infrastructure. What would once have been solved by human mediators within days stretched into months of increasingly hostile talks. The Nexus communication network was dying. The quantum entanglement systems that allowed instant communication across galactic distances needed constant adjustment as the galaxy's gravitational fields shifted. Human technicians had developed an almost artistic sense for these adjustments, treating each relay station like a musical instrument that needed constant tuning. Chief Communications Officer Yoon Jae-hyuk, watching the network's decline from Earth, saw communication delays between council worlds go from minutes to hours to days. Soon entire sectors would be cut off from real-time contact with the galactic government. "Should we offer to help?" his aide asked. Yoon shook his head sadly. "They made their choice, and honestly, we'll need all our resources to maintain our own networks now." On trade routes throughout the galaxy, merchant ships sat stranded at spaceports. The quantum storm maps that human navigators had updated daily were now weeks old. Without fresh data, traveling through hyperspace became a deadly gamble. Captain Velkara, a Velthari merchant who had worked with human crews for decades, stared at her ship's navigation computer. The route to the Centauri markets should have been simple. She had flown it hundreds of times with human navigators. But now, without their intuitive understanding of quantum currents, she was afraid to leave port. "The storm patterns keep changing," she told her crew. "The old maps show safe passage, but 3 ships following those same maps disappeared last week. Her cargo of rare crystals worth millions of credits sat in her hold, but she could not risk the journey." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as interstellar trade ground to a halt. The Council's emergency sessions became more desperate each week. Representatives who could still reach the central station spoke of growing problems on their worlds. Food shortages as agricultural systems failed, medical crises as hospital equipment broke down, communication blackouts isolating entire star systems. "Perhaps we should contact Earth," suggested a minor species representative quietly. The chamber erupted in angry clicks, crystal chimes, and electronic static. The major species were not ready to admit they needed help. "We are the Galactic Council," declared the Velthari representative. "We ruled space for 1,000 years before humans left their little planet. We can solve our own problems." But deep in space, on a dozen different worlds, the lights were going out. One by one, the systems that humanity had built and maintained were failing, and with each failure, the cascade grew stronger. The ancient keeper sat in their chamber, watching data streams from across the galaxy. They had seen this before in other civilizations in other times. Pride, they knew, always came before the fall. The galaxy was learning that some knowledge could not be replaced by logic alone. Some skills required not just intelligence, but wisdom earned through years of caring about getting things right. The cascade had begun, and momentum was building toward something much worse. 3 years after humanity left, the galaxy was on fire. The Silicon Collective and Organic Alliance war had spread to 17 star systems, burning worlds and destroying fleets with equal hunger. Without human peacekeepers to stop the fighting, or human diplomats to make peace deals, the conflict had become the kind of total war the galaxy had not seen in centuries. Admiral Park Ji-sung, who used to command Council Defense Forces but now led the Earth Defense Fleet, watched the war reports from his flagship's command center. His human crews monitored the destruction with professional interest, but no orders came from Earth to help. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, Lieutenant Commander Shin Yu-jin, "the Velthari government has sent another formal request for military advisors. They're offering to give us significant territory." "Acknowledged. File it with the others," Park replied. 47 species had made similar requests. Earth's response stayed the same: polite refusal. On what had once been the garden world of Kepler 442b, the atmospheric processors had finally failed completely. The crystal hegemony's best efforts had kept them running for 2 years after humans left. But without proper maintenance, the quantum cores had become unstable. The planet's carefully maintained atmosphere was slowly turning back into its original, poisonous composition. Evacuation ships struggled to remove the planet's 30 million inhabitants while communication blackouts made coordination nearly impossible. The Nexus network had failed completely in this sector 18 months ago. Families packed what they could carry into small bags, looking up at the sky that was slowly changing color from blue to sickly yellow. Children cried as they were loaded onto overcrowded transport ships. Parents tried to comfort them, but everyone knew they were leaving their home forever. "Why can't they fix the machines?" asked a young crystal child, her diamond form flickering with confusion. Her mother's light dimmed with sadness. "Because we never learned how, little one. We thought we were too proud to learn." In the depths of space, the hospital ship Mercy drifted powerless. Dr. Kethvy had tried her best to keep operations running, but without human technical knowledge, critical systems had failed one by one. The bioneural networks that controlled everything from life support to surgical systems had gradually broken down. Their quantum processors could not maintain stability without the unique human neural patterns they had been designed around. The last message received before their communications array died had been a distress call from the Kepler evacuation fleet. Hundreds of thousands of refugees were suffering from atmospheric poisoning, desperately needing the Mercy's advanced medical facilities. But the Mercy could no longer help anyone. Dr. Kethvy sat in her dark medical bay, surrounded by machines that had once saved lives but now sat silent and useless. She thought about Dr. Song Hye-jin, her human mentor, and wondered if the good doctor was watching from Earth, knowing that people were dying because of the Council's pride. The Council chambers themselves had become a symbol of the galaxy's decline. Once a shining example of interspecies cooperation, the station now showed signs of neglect and desperation. The bioluminescent walls flickered irregularly. The bio-neural networks that controlled environmental systems were failing without human. Maintenance technicians dotted emergency session after emergency session convened, each more desperate than the last. The remaining council members, nearly 200 species, had withdrawn to form regional alliances or retreat into isolation, shouted accusations and demands across the dimming chamber. "The humans planned this?" accused the Velthari representative, his bug-like form showing stress markers. "They designed their systems to fail without them." "Perhaps," admitted the ancient keeper representative, speaking for the first time in decades, "but they also designed them to work perfectly with them. The failure lies not in their engineering, but in our failure to understand it." The crystal. Hegemony's representative, their usually brilliant form now dim with exhaustion, had spent months trying to reverse engineer human technology. "Their systems aren't just technological," they reported. "They're intuitive, almost artistic. They built machines that think like humans think, that respond to human instincts. We can copy the hardware, but we cannot replicate the consciousness that made it work." Trade had collapsed completely. Without safe navigation routes, merchant ships sat idle in ports while populations on distant worlds faced starvation. The great manufacturing centers that had supplied the galaxy with everything from food to medicine had gone silent, their human-designed systems too complex for others to operate. On the agricultural world of New Harvest, millions of tons of grain rotted in storage facilities while transport ships remained grounded. The quantum preservation systems that had kept food fresh during long journeys required constant calibration that only human technicians had mastered. "We're surrounded by food, but we can't get it to the people who need it," reported the local administrator to anyone who would listen on the failing communication networks. As the session in the council chambers devolved into chaos, a junior aide rushed in with an urgent communication. The Silicon Organic War had reached a critical phase. Both sides were preparing to deploy planet-killer weapons rather than accept defeat. The galaxy was hours away from witnessing its first genocidal war in over a millennium. The Keeper representative stood slowly, their ancient form creaking with age. "We have learned," they said in a voice like cosmic wind, "that order without wisdom is merely organized chaos. We dismissed humanity's gift not because it was worthless, but because we were too proud to see its value." The chamber fell silent as the lights flickered ominously overhead. "Perhaps," the Keeper continued, "it is time to swallow our pride." 5 years after humanity left, the emergency delegation from the Galactic Council approached Earth orbit with desperation and fear. The sleek diplomatic vessel Reconciliation was one of the few ships still capable of interstellar travel. Most of the galaxy's infrastructure had collapsed, leaving entire sectors isolated and struggling. Ambassador Kethvi, the former medical officer who had been promoted to chief diplomatic envoy after all the Council's human specialists had departed, stared through the viewport at the blue jewel of Earth. Around it, a constellation of space stations and orbital habitats gleamed. Like a crown of stars, humanity had not been sitting idle during their isolation. Requesting permission to approach Earth orbital control, she transmitted, using one of the few remaining functional nexus relays that humanity still maintained for emergency communications. The response came quickly in perfect Velthari. Permission granted reconciliation. You are cleared for approach to Station Unity. Welcome to the Sol system. Station Unity was magnificent. It was a massive rotating habitat that made even the old Council Central Station look small. As their shuttle docked, Kethvi was greeted by Admiral Lee Min-ho, the former Council ambassador who now served as Earth's Director of Interstellar Relations. Ambassador Kethvi, Min-ho said warmly, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. I remember you from the Mercy. Dr. Song spoke highly of your dedication. Admiral Min-ho, Kethvi replied, her voice heavy with exhaustion. I come bearing the formal request of the surviving council members. The galaxy is dying. Min-ho nodded gravely. We know. We've been monitoring the situation. They walked through Station Unity's corridors, and Kethvi marveled at what she saw. Humans worked alongside members of dozens of species, but not the major council races. These were smaller peoples, refugees, and survivors who had sought shelter in human space as their own governments collapsed. The miners of Kepler 442b, Min-ho explained, noting her gaze. We helped evacuate them when their atmospheric processors failed. They're excellent engineers in their own right. They've taught us as much as we've taught them. In the growing bays, human farmers worked with plant-based Verdani refugees, creating hybrid growing systems that neither species could have developed alone. In the research labs, human scientists worked with the crystal scholars of minor species, sharing knowledge freely. This is what we always wanted, Min-ho said quietly. Not dominance, not dependence, but partnership. The formal negotiations took place in a chamber deliberately designed to echo the old council chambers, but smaller, more intimate. Representing the surviving council were Kethvi, 2 Crystal Hegemony members, a Silicon Collective unit, and the ancient keeper who had abstained from the original vote. Earth's delegation included Admiral Min-ho, Dr. Song Hae-jin, now Director of Medical Sciences, Chief Engineer Park Jun-woo, now Director of Infrastructure, and Captain Han Dong-wook, representing the merchant fleet. We need your help, Kethvi began without delay. The Silicon Organic War, the infrastructure collapse, the medical crises. We cannot solve these problems alone. The Keeper representative leaned forward, their ancient form creaking slightly. We were wrong, they said simply. We mistook your strength for weakness, your flexibility for chaos. We believed order meant uniformity. Dr. Song spoke first for the human delegation. We've watched the galaxy burn for 5 years. Do you know how hard it's been to maintain non-interference while beings we cared about suffered? Then why did you? Asked the Silicon representative, their voice like static electricity. Because, Admiral Min-ho replied, helping someone who doesn't want your help isn't help. It's control. You had to learn, as we once learned, that cooperation requires mutual respect. The negotiations continued for days. The council representatives laid out the scope of the crisis. 60% of the galaxy's infrastructure was broken. Communication had collapsed across entire sectors, and 3 ongoing wars threatened to become planet-killing scenarios. The human response was measured and thoughtful. They would help, but under new terms. No more council hierarchy with humans as servants. A new organization called the Galactic Cooperation Alliance, with shared leadership and decision-making power based on ability and contribution, not species membership. We've learned things too, Chief Engineer Park explained. Working with the refugees, the smaller species you council members often ignored, they've shown us new ways to solve old problems. This won't be about us fixing your galaxy. It'll be about all of us building a better one. Kethvi felt tears in her compound eyes. The Kepler refugees you mentioned, 3 million of my people are among them. We thought they were dead. Not dead, Dr. Song said gently. Building new lives. Some of them have become quite accomplished engineers and doctors. Would you like to meet them? The final agreement was signed, not in a grand ceremony, but in a simple conference room with representatives, eating a meal together, human food, Velthari protein synthesis, crystal energy matrices, and silicon mineral compounds all shared at one table. As the reconciliation prepared to depart with the first wave of human technical specialists, Kethvi found herself on the observation deck with Admiral Minho. Will it work this time? She asked. Minho looked out at the stars, where human ships were already departing to begin the long work of rebuilding galactic civilization. I don't know, he admitted. But now we're starting from a place of mutual respect instead of hierarchy. That's the most important foundation we can build on. The galaxy's road back would be long and difficult, but for the first time in 5 years, there was hope.